friends, and welcome back to another episode of Conservation Stories. Here on Conservation Stories, as you all know, we love to interview people that are doing great new things for the land and are interested in conservation and all things agriculture, and love also to protect our land rights. And that is one of the reasons why I've asked my friend Jennifer Bremer to join us today. Jennifer is the executive director of the Texas Land and Mineral Owners Association. Jennifer, thanks for being here.
Hey, Tillery, thanks for having me.
So I just want us to have a little conversation about, first of all, you, and tell our listeners a little bit about your background and how you got to be the executive director.
Yeah, so I am one of the fortunate ones that I was born into ag, actually. My grandparents had a farm and a little bit of cattle outside of Houston, which is slowly becoming Houston these days. And so my dad actually did not, being the second son, he did not work on the farm full time. But of course, they grew sweet corn, so we were out always picking. That was really my introduction. And then the other thing is that I started riding horses as soon as I could sit up. My family rodeoed, and so I had ag, from all angles. And then, of course, when I got of age, I got involved in 4-H, started showing pigs, and then I moved into steers and heifers. And then in high school, I moved over to our FFA program, and I served in various leadership positions and competitions, did livestock judging and all kinds of CDEs and LDEs. And then at that point, like every good 18-year-old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I grew up. And I went to A&M for ag business. I thought that was pretty general. I knew I wanted to work in ag, but I think there was so much more out there that I didn't know was there. Through my degree program, ag business, I did an internship called the Ag and Natural Resources Policy Internship, which placed me in Warren Chisholm's office, which is from up around y'all's way. And that's really where I got my start in my current career. So when I worked for Mr. Chisholm, we joked that he had more cattle than constituents in his district. And it's probably very close to true. He had 19 counties up along the panhandles. And when I worked for him, I actually met my next boss. So I went, after I did 2 sessions in the legislature, I went and worked in government affairs for the pipeline industry.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did about 5 years in the pipeline industry. And then when I decided it was time to make a change, I really wanted to get back into something that I was passionate about and that I personally cared for, as well as professionally. And the opportunity came to lead the Land and Mineral Owners Association. And so here, is kind of where I landed. And then the other thing is I am the longest standing employee of my aunt and uncle's wedding flower shop. So I do have some horticulture in the family.
Love it.
Too.
I love it. That's awesome. Now that's a fun job. That'd be like, well, unless you're doing the weddings, those are kind of hard. Those are kind of like stressful.
Yes, but it's always beautiful.
Oh yes, I'm sure. So that you just recently got married. So did they do your flowers?
They did.
Oh, they were amazing. Just amazing. Yes, amazing. So, question, tell us, what does your organization do? What does the association do?
So we are a statewide advocacy organization, which seems very general, but it's, what we all do best. And we focus on land and minerals and private property rights from the energy perspective. So we work very closely with the legislature and actually the judiciary, and then we'll work with the Railroad Commission when necessary. But our goal is for land and mineral owners, whether it's a severed estate or not, to be able to make their own choices about what the best use of their land is. We don't ever want to see laws that inhibit that ability or, place one industry over another. So that's kind of what we really work on, is to keep a fair playing field.
Interesting. So can you give us an example of some of the battles you fought in the last session?
Yeah, so the biggest thing we did last session was regarding carbon sequestration. The energy industry brought forward a bill that was pretty detrimental to our membership, and it, regardless of whether you were a landowner or a royalty owner, it was kind of bad for everybody. And so we worked on that. It had a few different big provisions in it. The easiest of which is pore space ownership. Sounds kind of silly. Who owns the pore space? But in Texas, that's a big deal.
So give us, like, for folks that might not understand mineral ownership and a background on, just kind of like a real short 101 on mineral ownership.
So Texas is unique. Not every state has this, but in Texas, the mineral estate is actually the dominant estate. So you have kind of the land that you see is what we consider traditionally your surface. And then when you get underneath, you have minerals such as oil and gas. That's taking on a new face in lithium. And now we're getting into carbon sequestration. So in Texas, you have two different ownerships. It can be the same person, but it isn't always.
Right. You have the right to sell that off as a separate property.
Correct. Yeah. And we're seeing more and more of that, honestly, where people are holding on to the minerals and selling the surface just because we like to call it mailbox money. The minerals, you just kind of get the money, and there is certainly some management to it, but not near the physical labor required such as surface ownership.
Exactly. So do you have a little bit of a rabbit trail here, and then we'll go back to pore space, but do you have members that are just mineral owners?
Yes. Yeah. We have just surface owners, just mineral owners, and then we have some that are both surface and mineral.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So what is pore space?
So the pore space, whenever you look at a piece of property, kind of like I was going back to, you see the surface. So then underneath, the ground itself contains minerals. Now, the minerals are typically contained within some type of space. So whether that's between rock or, in a pool of some type, any kind of formation. So the mineral owner actually only owns the molecules of the minerals, which leaves this open space of who owns that. And that pore space is what the carbon sequestration industry was looking to define ownership of.
And really those kind of things have been settled through court, like through lawsuits. And we kind of like wait around until the court tells us.
Yeah, and this is actually an interesting topic because there is a court case on it. And we feel that is pretty clear, but a lot of industry doesn't feel that same way.
So how do you feel like it's clear? So for the people that are listening, like what does that mean? Who do you feel like should own that pore space?
So the position is that the surface owner owns the pore space, but the mineral owner still contains all of the molecules within the pore space.
Isn't that fascinating? And, another thing I've seen happening in contracts is that I've seen people, deed the surface and the wind that blows across it and the sun that shines on it.
Yep. I'm calling all of that job security for me.
Oh my goodness. It is amazing what's happening, and in the industry that you're in, it's and of course my husband and I are in the same industry, but that bundle of sticks is what it's called technically is, the surface is one stick and the minerals are another stick and the pore space is part of now the surface, and then the wind could be a stick and the solar can be a stick. I mean, it's crazy.
We are very fortunate in Texas, and I try and remind people of this, but we are so fortunate that technology has advanced to make all of these opportunities available for landowners.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly right. And in fact, we were visiting with somebody else earlier that we're talking about the potential of, raising up solar panels so that you could go ahead and graze cattle and not just sheep, in some of these areas where we are, where it's really, it's having to go back to grassland. So then, if you have, that'd be great to be able to have two streams of income on that. And for a landowner to be able to have the right to decide if they want to do that is important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Carbon sequestration. So what they're wanting to do is use that pore space for that. And the oil, where you're saying is the legislation that they were proposing was that it would belong to who?
It was that it would belong to the surface owner.
Okay, so that's the legislation that you proposed.
The energy industry proposed it, and it was the one piece of the legislation that we could agree to.
Yes. Okay. That's interesting. So typically, what are you looking for when these bills and things come through? Are you pretty prepared by the time it comes around, the session comes around, and you kind of know the battles that you're going to have to fight? Or are you proposing legislation?
Well, it depends on what day you ask me on how prepared I feel during session.
Well, you never feel prepared during session. It's before that.
No.
Yes.
We have worked really hard to kind of establish a relationship with the energy industry, because we also recognize that without their investments in technology, that what we enjoy the benefits from wouldn't exist. And so we definitely have a symbiotic relationship and try and recognize that. So we have tried to work very hard to build relationships with industry so that we are more aware of what's coming for us. There's always the few that sneak through, that are surprises. But I think for the most part, we have a pretty good idea. As far as proposing legislation, it really just depends. We're looking at a few things, but something else that throws a wrench in a lot of our plans are whenever the Supreme Court makes a decision on a case that impacts our members. One thing that's a little bit unique about us is pretty much all of our members' work and interest are contract based. If there's a dispute, it has to go through the court system versus the legislature.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
And as you know, the legislature won't take up a bill if there's an ongoing court case. And so some of our work just depends on the court.
Right. And that's what I was referencing a while ago, is so many of these decisions are just, you just can't kind of sit and wait for like produced water. And that is something that's super of interest to us, especially up here where we're producing so much more water from drilling than we are oil. And what can we do with this produced water? And you guys you've done some work in that. Kind of give us an overview of what the question was: who owns that produced water that is coming out of the well and containing, the oil's coming out and this water's coming out, and it contains all kinds of stuff, and it's complicated because it has to be stored, et cetera, but it has also some things in it that could be valuable. So where are we in the state on that?
So right now, it is the Cactus Water Services versus COG operating, I believe. And that is at the Supreme Court right now, where we have filed a brief in that case, actually. And, this issue is so complicated, and some of it I probably cannot discuss. We haven't taken a formal position on some of the issues at hand, but it's important. I think, not only to ensure that the correct person is being compensated appropriately, but also just for the management of water. We hear so much about water, and unfortunately, some of our members in South Texas are the brunt of water going into the more metroplex areas like San Antonio. So I think it's, not only is it an ownership piece, that is critical, but we've got a bigger issue on our hands in regards to recycling it and being responsible.
Water is the biggest challenge our state has. I produced water or fresh water, it is the challenge of our time and what are we going to do? And I'm sure you guys are paying attention to that because water, your surface owners own that water unless they've sold it off. And so that's another that's another stick in the bundle. And it's probably, one of the biggest issues. So what are you looking at on water right now? And what are y'all thinking about and preparing for?
So right now, I would say we're waiting on the courts for the cactus decision. That's kind of the thing that we're watching. I am part of the Texas Produced Water Consortium, so I've been pretty involved in that. We haven't seen too much come out of that just yet, but they're getting going.
Yes, we are part of we work closely with New Mexico Produced Water, and we've been so impressed with Mike Hightower that runs that program, and New Mexico State, and they're very organized and they're doing a lot of work. And New Mexico State is a great university to work with because they're doing a lot of things that maybe they have the money to do those things that some of our other universities don't have, but they're able to really make some strides. And it's been really beneficial being on those committees and listening and hearing what's happening.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because people talk about water and kind of, the short supply. And I had a conversation with a group of people 2 weeks ago working to try and plan an event. And they were like, let's talk about water. And I said, that's great. I said, but from an ag perspective, something that people also don't think about is farming in the panhandle is drastically different than farming in Central Texas. Where I grew up, I had never seen a pivot. I had no idea what that was, because we rely on Mother Nature to give us water, and, hopefully she does on a good year. And so, the water use in ag is even a complicated topic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've even been like, we should have like 5 separate NRCS organizations. I mean, like it shouldn't be one in Texas. It should be 5, because it is so vastly different. So vastly different. Yeah. But, and I think that they're just issues that are going to have to be addressed, about how we're going to not just with produced water, but with fresh water, meet the demand of the people that are coming into the areas, into Texas, moving here. It's a lot of them.
It is, yes.
So on the freshwater side, what's happening there for you guys? Y'all being affected? I know you mentioned like people in South Texas, or those landowners are losing the water that they've had access to. Those farmers are.
Yeah, our members are definitely impacted. It's not something we work on super closely just because that's such a localized topic. I don't really engage with groundwater districts and things like that.
Yes, right.
That would be a whole different job for me, I think.
Oh my goodness, full time. Yeah. So you guys really, because it's really, you're working on statewide issues, and these issues are really very much they're going to have to be decided on those local, but it will, I think, impact you because, if some things are happening where, people are, limiting drilling, or people are wanting to, track how much water people are using and that kind of thing. I think that those issues are going to be raised.
Oh, absolutely. I definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah. So, well, you got a busy job.
Yeah.
You spend your time doing a lot of, wearing a lot of hats. Like when you're doing policy, you got to know some things about the law, and, you have to know a lot about technology. It's a complicated, plus just being able to really build, having the personality to build relationships with people in your membership, but also in the industry is really a gift. And I appreciate what you do.
Well, thank you. It's a fun job. It keeps me busy. I'm always learning something, which is great.
That's very good. So if there's somebody listening that's like, hey, this is probably something I would benefit from, and I'd like to be able to know more about the Texas Land and Mineral Owners Association, what should they do?
Well, I would say start at our website. We make it very easy, and we actually just took a letter out of our name to make our initials. So it's just tlma.org.
Okay, that's easy, and it will be linked on the show notes. And also, if people want to get a hold of you, we'll link that there as well if they've got any questions.
Yes, absolutely. I can always be reached via email. That's honestly the best way. And I'm happy to communicate and get in contact with anybody. As every association in America, I say right now, we are looking for members.
Yes. Yep. Well, what you're doing is really important, and it's important, I think, for landowners to be paying attention, to have somebody that's paying attention on their behalf, and you can't do that without membership.
No, and we certainly try our hardest, but I definitely can't do it alone.
Well, thanks for joining us, and thanks, friends, for joining us for another episode of Conservation Stories, and we look forward to being with you next time.